Con-Versation today, and I am joined by Bob Brill. And let me just say, it is such an honor to be in your presence. I mean, your career in radio, and you have written 13 books. Like, I am just I'm so humble and grateful that Greg asked me to do this today, because you have had such a fascinating career. So welcome to the Con-Versation. I'm so glad that you would.
Thank you, Amy. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that very much.
I mean, we were talking backstage, you guys, and it was just such a fun conversation that I can't wait to dive into it. But you also are, in your bio that Greg sent me, you are a diehard, and diehard is written in there, a hardcore Pirates Steelers fan.
And
I have respect for. Okay, I like football. I'm more in college football realm is more my realm, but I have respect for the Steelers. So hands down, I love that. As long as you're not a Dallas Cowboys fan, we can be friends.
No, we hate the Cowboys. The Penguins, Pirates, and Steelers are my three loves as far as sports is concerned. And I still somewhat follow college football, but when I do, it's only Pitt and Penn State, and college basketball I'll follow Pitt and University of Pennsylvania. I'm a diehard Pennsylvania guy, even though I live in LA, and I've lived in LA and in my radio career all around the Southwest for decades. My heart's still in Pittsburgh, and it's that old saying: you can take the city, you can take the boy out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the boy. So
right,
always where it's been.
I totally understand that. I live here in Aggieville, and I am not an Aggies fan by any means. I went to an extension of UT in San Antonio, so I'm not an Aggie by any means.
Well, I spent some time in El Paso in my radio career, and Austin really doesn't consider El Paso part of Texas, but they are. So
yeah, for sure.
The only mountain in Texas is in El Paso.
Yeah, my sister lived there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it really is like the desert, but you do have mountains, and it gets really cold up there. So it's actually really nice. I do enjoy it. But I would love to hear, Bob, how did you get into radio? I mean, you have won broadcasting awards, multiple broadcasting awards, to be honest. So how did you get into radio? Was it just always a love, or how did that come about?
It kind of goes back to the fourth grade. We had to write an assignment of what we wanted to, do when we grew up. And when I was in elementary school in Los Angeles, and the only thing I ever really wanted to do when I was a kid was play baseball. My plan was to play Major League Baseball. That's the dream. And so many kids had that dream, and, like 1% of 1% actually fulfill that dream. So, and the teacher asked me, she goes, well, that's fine and dandy, but what do you want to do as a backup? And I said, well, what's a backup? And she said, well, if you don't make it. And I said, well, I don't know. I had to think about it. I said, well, I'd only want to do something that was close to baseball, where I could stay close to the game. And so I thought, well, I could be a play-by-play announcer. That would be a great idea. So in high school, the year before I left high school, I graduated in 1971. The year before, I got I saw an ad for a broadcast school. And so I sent them a letter, and they said they couldn't talk to me because I wasn't a senior. I wasn't graduating. And so I said, oh, okay, well, let's forget about that. Well, a year later, like a couple months before we graduated, I got a letter from them saying, hey, remember us? If you want to come here, this is what you have to do. And it was a 4-month course in Hollywood. It was with Career Academy, which no longer exists, Career Academy School of Broadcasting. And so I did the course and just decided that instead of going to college, even though I was registered for college, I had one class called History of Broadcasting. I would go to work. And so I had a Volkswagen van, $600, and a broadcast yearbook, which had all the radio stations that I mapped out a course, and I figured I had enough to last me, 4 to 6 months. Okay, at least that's what I thought. Hey, I'm 18 years old, 17 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so first day out, I got a job in Banning, California, on a radio station of 250 watts. It really wasn't even supposed to be on the air. Long story short, it'll take me too long to go into that story, but you can hear that story on one of my podcasts, which is called Interesting People with Bob Brill. And I did 31 days celebrating my 50th anniversary in radio. And I told stories of life on the radio. That's one of them. Anyway, so within the week, I left there, walked out. And within the week, I had a job in Prescott, Arizona, which was my first real radio job. But I was there 4 months before I got fired and moved back to LA. And I got a job in LA. And then my radio career took all different sorts of turns from there to the network. And I worked at UPI Radio Network, did some stuff for NBC, CBS as well. And then eventually worked my way back. Was working in the 80s. I was working at KNX News Radio. And then in 2006, I went back and to KNX again. And I've been there ever since. So
I love that. One, I could listen to you talk all day because your voice is just perfect for it. So I'm here for it, like 100%. But in your, bio that Greg had sent me and stuff, I mean, it says that you have interviewed presidents, you've covered Super Bowl games, Hollywood, you've done all kinds of things. So what was that experience like? I mean, I don't get starstruck. I tend to think that I don't get starstruck and stuff, but I think, interviewing a president, I might, so what was that experience like?
Yeah, it really was. I think I've had, brief interviews with with Jimmy Carter and George Bush, the first George Bush. And I traveled, during the campaign with the Clinton folks and also with Jesse Jackson. But the one really sit down, neat interview I had was with Jerry Ford after he left office. And it took me a while to arrange it. Basically, I was doing a radio documentary on the 30 years since the Kennedy assassination, the John Kennedy assassination. So that would have been 1993. And Ford was the last surviving member of the Warren Commission, which investigated the Kennedy assassination. And so I felt I had to get Jerry Ford on the record. And he had also written a book about it years before. And finally, they gave in. It didn't cost me a dime. And I say that because the old joke was, if you wanted to meet Jerry Ford or shake his hand, you met him on the golf course, and this hand shook his, and this hand had $10,000 in it. So, the guy was just president for a short time, and didn't really make all that much, but he was a congressman for a long time. And anyway, so we sat down at his office in Palm Desert, near Palm Springs, and had a great interview. I have used parts of that interview since then. Again, that's one of the interviews that, again, I have to keep referring to that podcast, Interesting People with Bob Brill, but that's one of the episodes I put on there. And it was great. It was just really, I still have a picture of it sitting on my my bookshelf over here. And it was just a really cool time. And I had sort of interviewed him in the crowd a couple of times earlier when he came to Tulsa to play golf. And but yeah, that was really cool. Probably, my two favorite moments in radio probably were just two moments that just happened. One was a story I covered, the most fun story I've ever covered in my life. I've covered, like I said, I've covered Super Bowls. I've been at Super Bowls covering the story. I've been, all over the place. Been to Southeast Asia, covered the Olympics in Seoul, and all through all that. The most fun story I've ever covered was the Zsa Zsa Gabor trial, and it was a trip. It was something strange and goofy and new every day, and she was strange and goofy and new every day, and we got it. I can't play it for you, but myself and another reporter who became a longtime friend of mine, who was actually in a podcast coming up we're doing, Michael Ambrosini, we caught her upstairs coming off an elevator, and I asked her, I said, what did the cop, for those who don't know, she slapped a cop. That's why she was on trial for assault.
Right.
And so we asked her, what did the cops say to you? And of course, she changed her story every day. I mean, it went here, there. She'd call him this horrible man, this who beats women, but he's such an Adonis, and he's so a good-looking man, and he's so beautiful, and and in the same breath, and so I asked her, I said, what did the cops say to you? She goes, he told me, he said to me, get out of my blanket face. I'm going to break your blanket legs. I'm going to something. Anyway, it was 4 different things where she used the F-bomb, and he told me to blank off, and then she finished the sentence with, "I'm from Europe. I don't talk like that."
Okay.
and it was just like this great 18-second soundbite that I had to put when I used it on the network. I had to put beep tones on it, obviously, and it was just the funniest thing. But it was just a fun trial. And the other moment was I was traveling with Nelson Mandela when he was on his tour of the U.S. after he'd gotten out of prison. And a bunch of us reporters, it was in Oakland, and a bunch of us reporters were sitting backstage, just kind of waiting for the event to start. And he comes wandering backstage. He says, "Hi, guys, how you doing?" And this beautiful Mandela voice, and he just starts talking to us. We sat down and just no microphones, no nothing, just us and Nelson Mandela talking for like 10 minutes. And it was the coolest thing, and I've always cherished that particular moment in my career, because it was just like something just don't happen. It's like, hey, hanging out with Paul McCartney or something,
That's crazy. Those are good. I like both of those for sure, because that would be the coolest thing. So how did that, because we talked before, you've written 13 books. So how did your career in radio, did that, weave into you becoming a writer, or how did you get started on your writing?
Well, I've always written since I was a small child. I used to, I guess I was 5 or 6 years old. I would write jokes and tell them to family members, and they were pretty bad jokes, but out of courtesy, they laughed, and they feel good. And then, in my radio career, of course, early on, you'd write your own copy. And I used to, I would develop some stories that I could put long form, and I enjoyed that part of it so much. And then I always wanted to write books. And finally, I found a subject that I wanted to put together a book on. And it was more of putting that book together, because it was a coffee table biography called Fan Letters to a Stripper, about a burlesque queen by the name of Patty Wagon, who married a Major League Baseball player in the 1950s. And turns out my connection to them, even though I never met them, was they lived about a mile from where I grew up in the city of San Fernando in Los Angeles. And they banked at the bank across the street from where I lived. I ended up buying much of the estate. And Don Rudolph, who was the husband, actually, we missed each other in youth baseball. He coached in the league where I played. We missed each other just by a year. And actually, he was killed in a traffic accident, which I never knew until I started doing research on the story. And I wrote an article for Beckett Publications. And that led to a whole lot of other things. And then I purchased the rights to their story, part of their story, another sort of a roundabout thing in the names. And so now I've written a film script based on, inspired by the book. We're still trying to get that out there. And we're coming out with a podcast later this month called Major League Stripper. Major League for him, Stripper for her. And it's be a 2.5-hour podcast, but we'll also release it on episodes as well. And it's basically, there's like 25 actors that we hired that are involved for all the voices. When I wrote the script and then went to convert it to a podcast, I didn't realize how many voices I had. There's 100 speaking roles.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, and a friend of mine is a major producer said, Bob, blockbusters don't even have 100 speaking roles. And I said, yeah, I know that. So what I did was I have a lot of actors who did like 5 or 6 roles. And, some of the speaking roles are man in crowd, woman on street corner, where they have 1 line or 2 lines. And, an actor will play maybe 1 in the first episode, but you won't hear him again until the 8th episode. Then the 15th is different characters. And the average person is not going to know that, which is fine. And, but that'll be out in later. Will be out in December, probably right around Christmas. We'll have that out. But then there's 2 original songs, which a friend of mine from high school wrote the music, and I wrote the lyrics. And so now I have lyricist on my resume too. So
nice. Oh my gosh, just add to it, right? I love
it. I'm not shy.
I love it. I'm not either. Like I'm not a writer, to write a book. I work with authors and I live vicariously through you guys and the creativity and the imagination, right? Which I love. And I love how, writing just seems to have been a part of you, this whole time. And you finally found, the right moment to start writing the subject to write about. So are all of your 13 books, are they all like research driven? What are the genres?
There's probably, I think there's 3 that one's a memoir on it's called what is it called? Tales of My Baseball Youth, a Child of the 60s. And basically that's a memoir of growing up playing different forms of baseball, and it's a relationship book. Parents, uncles, friends, coaches, and it's something that every kid who grew up playing a sport would identify with, and it's my story. Then I have an instructional book which I wrote about golf and baseball or softball, but using the left and right side of your body to hit. And then I've written 6 of the planned 10 books in a series of Western novels based on a solo character who is in Tombstone in the 1880s called Lancer Hero of the West. And each book is Lancer Hero of the West, and then the Prescott Affair, the Los Angeles Affair, the Santa Fe Affair, because he goes to other towns to solve these crimes. And he's a good guy, gunslinger, respecter of women, likes kids, that kind of stuff. But he's kind of mysterious. And he'd be somebody you could actually put in the 22nd century or 21st, whatever we're in. And you could make him a character in that time frame as well. And then it's funny because the book I've sold most on Amazon, I just found out, is a book I wrote. It's a novel called El Cabo, Homegrown Terrorist. And it takes place 10 years after, or 25 years after bin Laden, after 9/11. And it's a terrorist plot and chase the FBI and chase trying to find these terrorists. And it's probably one of the better books I've written as far as research and in-depth and character development. But it's blown me away that it's been the most popular. And then the latest book, and there's a sequel to this one coming out next year. I haven't written its outline, but I haven't written it. It's called The Tattoo Murder. And The Tattoo Murder is definitely the best book I've ever written. It's based on, it's based in Ventura, California, which is right on the coast between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. Sort of a poor man's Santa Barbara, I guess is what you'd call it. And I lived there for a number of years, twice. And it's a wonderful community, but this is a cop who surfs. And he's sort of a local James Bond when it comes to his women. But he's a surfer. He spends, when he really is stressed out, he surfs at night and gets the waves. And the music, the music of the era, or his music. And it's very, very deeply involved. And the basic story is, in the first scene, a bloated body washes up on shore and that was murdered. and he ends up having to try to not only solve that, but try to keep two rival motorcycle gangs from going to war and tearing up the city and everything. So, and realistically, there are some characters in the book that are based on people that I knew or know, and then even though they're not named that, the Ventura has always been the corporate headquarters of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang, and so that's there's a biker identity there, and every other corner is a tattoo parlor, so the tattoo murder works.
Wow, I love that, and I love how you said, you know, the series to it or the sequel to it will come out next year because you have it outlined. So going into it being outlined, are you very much a plotter, or are you a pantser? Are you a little bit of both? What's your writing technique?
Well, I've always been kind of a pantser, but plotter more recently because of the research involved, and character development for me comes from as the book is being written. There's a few characters which I know ahead of time, but I kind of let the book flow and develop itself in some ways. But the plotter, because this book is, I'm actually basing it on loosely on a trial that I covered years ago when I worked in Fresno in radio there about it's called, I can tell you what the title is. It's going to be called The Belt Buckle Murder. And there was a case in Fresno, which was a very interesting case about a burned body that the only way they could identify the murder victim was by his belt buckle. And he was had been named the Fresno County Rancher of the Year. And he was wearing that belt buckle when he was killed. And they burned the body, and that was the only way they could figure it out. So that's going to be kind of the basis of this second book. But it's going to have political involvement and some other twists and turns, which take it into the modern world of some of the things that happen in the criminal element, the major criminal elements of the world today, mixed in with politics. So.
I love that. That gives me like Columbo vibes, you know, like he always
cool.
always like spotted that like one thing, you know, or like that one part of the story that never made sense. I grew up on Columbo. I still watch Columbo to this day. Like I watched it with my mama, and now it's like on my TV. I watch it and I'm just like, yes, I'm here for it. But it gives me that, and I love that it's loosely based on, you know, one of the trials that you were covering and doing information on.
Amy, I'm thinking here. You had Columbo on the mind, right?
Yes. I love Columbo. Absolutely. But Bob, man, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and talk with me. This has just been, I mean, I don't get starstruck by any means, but I would love to meet you in person. I feel like if I ever come to California, I'm going to come find you for sure.
Well, as they say out here, we'll do lunch.
Oh, yes, for sure. We'll have to. I'm going to get there somewhere. I've always felt like I was like a California girl, you know, and I'm living in Texas. It's out of my element, but I am a good old, you know, Texan girl as well. I haven't left Texas at all. I don't travel. So, but I will get there, and we will have to do lunch. But you guys, you have plenty more conversations coming up with Greg Kelso for the rest of the week. I was just here to join you guys today. But until next time, you guys, bye, everybody.